This?
Yeah, it's going lopsided.
You know,
pull down the other side a little bit.
This one?
Yeah, on your head exactly.
No. What if I pull this one up a little bit more? Will that play? Listen, I started this thing off with my head buns and everything like that, but let me tell you something. I have a great respect for people who actually do weave things, because God Almighty, that thing is annoying. Oh wow. Okay, let's talk about The Last Jedi. First things first, The Last Jedi is not a rehash of Empire Strikes Back. I know a lot of people, when Force Awakens came out, they were all worried about the fact that Force Awakens felt like if it was a New Hope. Well, I can safely say you're not going to get that with The Last Jedi. It's not Empire Strikes Back. To be honest with you, I think a lot of people forget about the fact that Force Awakens had a tough job to do. It had to make Star Wars fully operational, and if you understood that reference, 10 points. There were hints of both a New Hope, but if you really look at Force Awakens, it had hints of like Return of the Jedi and Empire kind of just smushed into one. And it did what it needed to do in that it brought Star Wars back, not just for us who would have grown up watching it and, you know, making a sort of noise, but brought in a whole new generation into it. So that worked out splendidly. However, I can safely say that we're going to walk into and walk out of The Last Jedi knowing that this movie is a completely different type of film.
This is not going to go the way you think.
It is the most un-Star Wars film to date. And in a good way. Because, you know, like the prequels were un-Star Wars, but at the same point in time it still had points that made you go like...
I don't like sand.
I don't think you're going to have that much of a complaint with The Last Jedi. It's bold, it's fresh, there's a lot of familiarity to it, so you know that you are in a Star Wars movie. It's not like if it tipped you out and threw you off a ledge or anything like that. I'm just watching the opening crawl. Once you start with the first line of that opening crawl, I was like, okay, I know where this movie is going. This is going to be different. And all throughout the film, you actually get that. It pulls you in where it needs to, kind of smacks you over the head sometimes when it needs to, so that you're not completely comfortable. And it expands it a little bit more. We'll get into that in a little while. Star Wars is religion. Let's be honest about it. Star Wars is religion. Star Trek is science. When you're dealing with religion, there are certain touchstones that will always be present, no matter what's happening. So it's powerful light and powerful darkness. It's a thriving military. It's always a band of rebels. It's unlikely heroes and politics. And at the end of the day, hope. Those are things that will always define a Star Wars film, whether it's the anthologies or the episodes. And like religion, all you need sometimes is just for somebody else to come and expand it a little bit, to show you a slightly different side. And that's what Rian Johnson did with this film. He actually kind of opened it up a little bit more. Like, for example, the way how the Force moves, or how the practitioners of the Force moves in this film, it expands it a lot more. It's a lot different than how you would have seen in the first 6, even 7 films. Of course, like any religion, there are a lot of things that if you come in as a Star Wars non-believer, you may not necessarily catch all the hints. And this is the one gripe that I have with Star Wars films in general, because you have all these novels and all these comic books and stuff that gives something of like a deep insight into what things are, and then the movies come out and they act almost separate to the novels.
That's not how the Force works.
There's a great deal of humor in The Last Jedi without it hitting you over your head. Looking at you, Marvel, there's a great deal of psychological darkness in the film without totally depressing the film. Looking at you, DC. 6 to 7 out of 10 things hit. The film is like 2.5 hours. It could have been cut by 15 minutes, I think. Like there's an entire segment that takes us to a new planet. And while that segment helps push the story forward, I don't know if I needed it that much. Speaking of that planet, it's called Canto Bight. Canto Bight is like rich people planet. You know, the 1%ers of the Star Wars galaxy, so to speak, would go there. When it comes to Star Wars, what we've known to see is swamp, forests, gas giants, and of course, sand.
I don't like sand.
And then of course, in between all of that, you'll have like your Coruscant and your Naboo, which are wealthier planets, but you've never actually got to see like what rich people do in a Star Wars universe. Other planets that we got to meet in The Last Jedi was Crate. We first learn about Crate in an audiobook called Leia, Princess of Alderaan. And Crate was one of the founding planets of the Rebel Alliance. That's where Bail Organa and Mon Mothma and Bria Organa and that small cluster had started the first group of the Rebel Alliance there. So the idea of them going back to Crate kind of has real significance both to the rebellion as well as Princess Leia herself. Acto is another one of those new areas that we got to see. It's one of those places that's like the swamps and Dagobah in terms of it's Force sensitive. It's really important. The Force does some really strange things on Act 2. It's also where Luke has been hiding out for the longest while, and we'll get to his reasons later. She is a character who we first met in Leia, Princess of Alderaan. She and Leia knew each other from like when they were 16, and they were in the Junior Senate together, and you know, they kind of went on their own adventures at one point in time. So to see her back now, for someone who's read the books and stuff like that, it was really cool. She sort of became the de facto leader, and you'll see why. Oh my, you know, I honestly do not have an actual logical reason to tell you how much I love Kelly Marie Tran, like as a person in general. Rose is a mechanic, but she ends up becoming so much more. You know, like how Star Wars always does that whole unlikely heroes kind of scenario? That's where Rose takes it. we got to get a little bit more out of Finn this time. He's still not 100% a rebel. He's still trying to, you know, escape all of this madness, and we see where that leads. Let's just say Phasma is the Boba Fett of this film, of this generation. Again, she's one of those characters where you have a whole book, there's a whole book called Phasma, and you get to see how ruthless she could be growing up. There is a logic behind it. It's just kind of sad that in the films they don't really go too much into it. Poe Dameron returns. He has a bigger role in this film. The thing with Poe is that you can see that Leia was trying to groom him to be a leader. Leia has always seen more of him. You actually get to see the conflict and a little bit of growth. You got to see a lot more of him in action. That was fun. Interesting side note, before Oscar Isaacs was dashing space pilot, he was dashing carpenter who protected a girl and her holy baby.
I must travel to Bethlehem.
I'm going with my husband.
Hux needs to go. I'm sorry. Hux is reminding me way too much of Governor Tarkin. I mean, even down to the way how he rules his R's. The resistance will be... I need Hux to do something that either blows my mind or Hux, you know, blows up. As mysterious characters go, don't expect to get too much from or about him. What I did like about DJ, now that I think about it, is that he was there to sort of help Finn solidify his position. You kind of realize, okay, he's there to sort of open Finn's eyes a little bit and show him what is really going on. Don't go in there thinking you're going to get a full backstory on Snoke, which is kind of unfortunate because there's hints to the idea that he might be coming from the unknown regions of the dark side, of space, but you don't get to find out too much about Snoke, and Andy played him really well. Now when it comes to Pogs, I've been on the side of Jira Pog, or you know, maybe some roasted Pogs with like a little hint of nutmeg. I will say, you know, they weren't as annoying as I was expecting them to be. Like, they weren't overplayed. This is perhaps the most epic I have seen Mark Hamill in like ever. Luke Skywalker shot himself off from the Force, and this is not a spoiler, so you're fine. He moved off to Octo, stayed away from everything else because after the events of Ben's transformation to Kylo Ren, he just decided this is ridiculous, this is it. It is, as the trailer says,
It's time for the Jedi to end.
This was as much Luke's journey as it was Rey's journey. She comes to the island naturally to look for Luke because the Resistance needs his help, and she needs someone to guide her through the Force, through the ways of the Force. It's kind of like Grumpy Uncle meets really ambitious niece kind of vibe. Those two have a parallel that really worked for the film. It's interesting because like when the film was being made, they had actually said that there are two protagonists in this film. He and Rey are two sides of the same coin. And how that expands and what eventually becomes of Kylo is actually pretty decent. I know, a lot of us have issues. Let's be real, after you go and murder Han Solo, what can there be for you? Where next can you go? Well, the film explores exactly where next you can go with that. I have to be honest with you, I'm still not over the idea that Carrie is not here. 8 was going to be about Luke and by extension Mark Hamill. So 9 was really going to be Princess Leia's film. It was going to show Princess Leia in a way that might have just been like, oh my god, this is all about and for Carrie. I have to say, I felt like if it was beautifully handled, like our princess was on it. You got to see things about Leia that you only would have read about in some of the Star Wars canon books. You got to get a glimpse as to who Leia is. That was a little bit more than what they showed us in Force Awakens. You got to see a bit more of Leia that sort of reminded you of the original trilogy Leia. Like, I mean, Leia is walking around with a blaster in her hand, for crying out loud. This is the kind of person that she is. But it also pays to know that Leia is also very, very tired. She's trying to groom other people to lead the Rebel Alliance because she can't do this forever. Overall, I can see why Ryan was given a new trilogy. There are hints and things that he put in that film that is like, okay, I get possibly where you can go. Again, I reiterate, this was not Empire, so that's a good thing. It answers some questions, but then it also leaves you being like, brr, for a lot more. So maybe we'll get that answered in episode 9. Should you take your kids to see it? Yes. Should you go see The Last Jedi yourself? Yes. And I put the kids in front of everything else because yes, there is some violence, but if you let them watch Avengers or Justice League or anything like that, it's stylized and it's Star Wars. Even though the narrator did say some of the scenes may be too intense for younger viewers, I still feel like you can bring your kids to it. Plus it's Christmas and you need to treat yourself, so do it. So yeah, that's The Last Jedi. I give it a conservative 8 out of 10. The fanboy in me wants to give it a full 100%, a full 10 out of 10, but there were parts of it, like I said, that lagged. There are parts that could have been taken out. There are some questions that needed to be resolved that weren't. But all in all, Star Wars The Last Jedi is a fantastic film. I will be going and seeing it again because, I need to see it for more research reasons and stuff. Basically, go see The Last Jedi. See you.